Hello, YouTube. My name is Adam Buckley, and I'm the mix engineer and mastering engineer behind the Underking EPs, Amongst the Dead and Ghosts of the Past. They came out earlier this year. And today I'm going to be taking you behind the mix in my session for the new Underking song, The Throne, that came out Friday, June 19th. So in this video, we'll start off with the drums, the bass, and this shaker track. And then in another video, I'll go into detail on the guitars and the vocals and everything else. So, yeah. Max and Dustin from Underking are incredibly creative songwriters. I've personally never heard anything as original and so well fitting to each song as what they come up with. It takes very little tweaking anywhere to improve on things, in my opinion. But anyway, we'll start with the drums, and this is what they sound like on their own. So you can hear we've got a fairly nicely balanced kit. We've got some very nice click and some weight in that kick sound, which there is a sample blended in, as you can see. The same with the snare, but for the most part it's the real kit, but it's not actually a real marked up kit. It's all programmed. Neither myself or Max have got the ability to record an actual drum kit at the minute, so it's all programmed. Everything in the Underking songs up to now is programmed. Maybe that's how it'll always be, but maybe there'll be an actual drummer one day. Who knows? But yeah, we've got Stephen Slate drums 5, just kick, snare, kick in, kick out, snare top, snare bottom, hi-hat, 3 toms, overheads, and a stereo room just to glue everything together. This is my typical way of routing drums. Sometimes I'll only have 2 toms, but for the most part, this is exactly what it's like in all of my mixes that use Stephen Slate drums. And we've just got a couple of samples blended in just to add a little bit extra. It's not a bad sound necessarily without the samples, but it just adds something extra. So this is what it sounds like without the samples. You can hear that the kick and the snare are very much, while they're still there, they sound a lot more buried, and that's obviously because I've blended the samples in to taste. But the reason those are so low in the mix is I'm just not a huge fan of how they sound without the samples, especially the kick. It's a fairly big difference there, just because of how much weight. I think the sample just on its own sounds incredible. Obviously, I know it doesn't sound very realistic. It's not supposed to, but in the mix, in context with everything else, it works very well. The same for the snare. I'd say the snare probably sounds even less realistic. Just one velocity. It's a one shot. It's just there to add some overall crack and snap to the snare and to add a little bit of ambience. And that's essentially all I'm doing. The majority of it is just this actual SSD5 snare. But yeah, the kick sample I'm using is Jordan Valeri. It's Glass Kick. It's from his Rock and Metal Kicks pack, which I'm not sure if you can still get anywhere, but I bought them a few years ago. It's my go-to kick sample for pretty much everything. I really like the way it sounds on the majority of things. And the same for the snare sample, really, which is from the Drumforge Taylor Lawson pack. I'm just using the main snare. I really like the way that sounds, and if I'm just doing like a very rough balance, I'll sometimes just add that in so the drums sound more complete. But yeah, those are my go-to samples. I highly recommend them, but obviously they're not for everyone. They're not going to be perfect for every situation, but for me they work quite well. So yeah, moving on a little bit to reverb. You can see just on the room track, of all places, I've got just one sound going to a drum plate, which is being run by Waves IR1. That's the reverb I use for pretty much everything. Very versatile. Got a few presets of my own that I just switch between. And yeah, I didn't want to have like massive roomy sounding drums, so it's like barely noticeable. It's very subtle, but if you listen to like the decay on the like snare, you can hear it a little bit better. But yeah, I didn't want a big roomy drum sound. I thought the room track just on its own took care of a lot of the ambience for me. So that's why there's basically no reverb. That's something that you'll find across pretty much the entire mix. The guitars I've got more on, but I'll get into that in the other video. But like for the vocals, for the most part, I just use delay. So yeah, if we move on to the drum bus, I've just got the Waves SSL bus compressor, which is barely doing anything. So I'll just play the whole mix and just watch that needle. It's doing something, but it's like just about doing something. It's only doing like 2 or 3 dB of compression. Nothing drastic, just something to kind of level things out a little bit and just bring everything together more. Give it a little bit more glue. Which that's essentially what I try and go for with my drum sound, especially on the bus. Is I'll just compress it a little bit, glue it all together a little bit more, and yeah, I think this is actually the last mix, or one of the last mixes I did, where I'm using this. I've started using the Empirical Labs Arouser, which looks like this. It's essentially a distressor, but in plugin format. It's what Empirical Labs, wish the distressor was like the hardware unit. But yeah, it's an incredible compressor. I'm sure if I do any more mix breakdowns in the future, it will be making an appearance. But yeah, that's basically my drum sound. Next, we'll move on to this shaker track, which sounds like this. It reminds me, I suppose, a little bit like a rattlesnake, just because obviously it sounds like a rattlesnake. And this is something that I recorded in myself. Everything else is pretty much just Max. But the shaker I added in just to give it a little bit of energy overall. If I play the entire mix for you, you'll hear what it sounds like without it, which is how I originally got all these tracks, and then I'll bring it in, and you'll just hear that kind of instant lift in energy. It's not in your face, but you can tell there's something different when it's brought in. It's like, oh, that's really just like took things up a little bit. It keeps it interesting. It's not throughout the entire song. It's just in the choruses and in this like bridge guitar solo section that we've got going on here. Just to, if you got it going throughout the entire song, it'd get very boring very quickly. So it's just something to spice it up a little bit. And I think it works very well, if I do say so myself. It stops everything feeling as empty. It really does just spice things up a little bit. So if we move on to the bass, this is what my bass sounds like. As you can hear, not very realistic, but it doesn't need to be, especially in this kind of a mix where everything's rather heavy. I know there's much heavier songs out there, but it's not like an acoustic ballad. It's not as noticeable. So to program bass TI, I got just the raw sound, duplicated it, and then ran both of them through the Dark Glass Ultra suite from Neural DSP, which is my go-to for the majority of my bass sounds. I've got one that went through the B7U, which sounds clean, very bright. And then we've got a fuzz bass, which went through the Vintage Ultra, which sounds like this when it plays. So two drastically different tones, but blend them together and you get a nice sound. And then just on there we've got a little bit of compression using the Waves CLA3A. It's really not doing too much. It's peaking around 7 dB reduction, which it's not so much like, oh, I want to hit that number. It's right, I just want to level things out a little bit. This is the sound that I want, and then I just stop when I get there. The settings are pretty much the same, I think. Yeah, they're very much the same settings. And then both of those tracks are going to the same bus that then splits into this bass low and bass high track, which the low track is filtering out everything above 175 hertz. It's just those sub frequencies. And then the opposite for the high track, it's filtering out everything below 175 hertz, but also filtering out everything above 7K. It's a bass. There's not a lot of high end at all, and there's no need for it to be there, especially when there's things like the vocals and some of the guitars and like the reverbs that may need that space. So yeah, I just filter everything. On their own, they really don't sound too great, but that's why they're blended together. These are very close in volume, like looking at the faders, but it's very much song specific as to how much of each track there is in the mix. And then from there we just go to the CLA 76, which again, very similar settings. I think the only thing that's different is like the output, and I'm just doing a little bit around 7 to 10 dB of compression just to really level things out, especially with this low track. I like to keep things nice and even, just so there's not like a massive low end build up, which just compressing it really kind of helps a little bit with that. And then I do the same thing just to level out the high frequencies as well. And that's it for my bass sound. No extra EQ or anything, which might shock someone, might not. It depends, if you're a professional, in the field, you very much know it's not one size fits all, and not every engineer's got the same way of working. But to anyone like just starting out in that phase of like only boost or cut 3 dB on an EQ, it might seem like a very almost alien concept, but it works for me. I'm happy with it. There might be simpler ways to work, but at the minute, this is what I'm sticking with. I've stuck with it for a few years. Yeah. So what I'll do now is I'll just solo everything that we've just been through and let you listen to what it sounds like. But yeah, that's essentially it from me. And in the next video, I will go over the guitars. I will go over the vocals, reverbs, delays, this harmonizer track, the effects. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.